Yes,
Call the
yes.
meeting to order. We'll go ahead and start with introductions. I'm Ely Lowry, and I get to chair this subcommittee, and I'm a member of the school board.
I'm Gary Holland, also a member of the school board.
Gary Bradshaw, Executive Assistant for the Board of Education.
Kenny Proctor, Communications Department.
I'm Mason Dirk. I'm a Franklin student representative with the Student Council and student rep for this committee.
Awesome.
Judy Brennan, Director of Enrollment and Transfer.
Courtney Westling, Director of Government Relations.
Lisa Merritt, Legislative Liaison.
Right. We are going to start today with an update on right to return, which I believe is Judy.
Well,
Would you kick us off?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Courtney.
always.
I'll kick us off. And thanks, Judy, for being here. So there's a long history here, but as we know, for lots of different reasons, a lot of which has to do with gentrification and housing crisis. Many of our families that have legacy family traditions of going to certain schools, and especially Albina, have been pushed out of this part of town.
Yeah.
And so a few years back in 2017, I think it was, Judy met with Ron Herndon, Tony Hobson. Was there anyone else, or was it mostly just the two of them?
Well, I'll just back up
Yeah,
and say
yeah, you can
that-
take it. She's
that
been doing it a little longer.
in July 2017, a coalition of African American men came to our school board and presented some concerns and goals. And it had to do, it was centered around the opening of Harriet Tubman Middle School, which was imminent, and the importance of, centered the importance of giving students the right to return to the Albina community. From that, the school board then designated some liaisons to meet with community leaders, including Tony Hobson and Ron Herndon. And I was part of the staff that supported the discussion as well. And what we've been trying to do since then is ensure that every child whose family was displaced from Albina and wishes to enroll in an Albina school has a simple, clear path to do so. The reason it's been 5 years and we're still not sure that we can say that definitively to every family is because of the laws that govern transfers across district lines. Because so many students have moved out of the Portland Public School district boundary, and they have to get permission from their resident district in order to come in here. The law around it is completely blind to many of the factors that we would need to know in order to give priority to students. We asked in 2020 whether the state would be willing to add some kind of language around prioritizing families who had been displaced, thinking that that could have positive effects outside of this circumstance by potentially being supportive of Native American families, families who had been displaced because of fires and the like. So then the pandemic hit, and I would say, Courtney has really taken on the role of trying to keep us moving and aim communication with, and then we received a response from ODE in March. Back to you.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you for the history about that meeting. I had forgotten, and I think that was another late board meeting, I think I recall, that you alluded to in 2017, the last really, really late one. So in 2020, there was conversation about, should we try to amend interdistrict transfer statutes? That was met with some disgruntled voices from our labor partners. They're very difficult. It's very contentious. We don't want to just have a free for all. That's, some people like to look at Riverdale as an example. So instead of going that track, we thought, is there a way to do this in rule through the State Board of Education? That's when I reached out to ODE to say, hey, is this something that we could pursue at the state level without doing this? They were kind of open to the conversation. They really wanted to do some internal work and then some outreach. During all that time and fast forward, pandemic hits, some transitions at ODE happened, when their staff changes, all the information goes out the door, right? So we kind of started again back in the fall, this past fall, late summer, and said, hey, we want to pick this back up. It's been on ice. What is the process? What do you need from us? How can we keep going? They hired a consultant, or maybe they already had something on retainer, but they put a woman named Carmen Gary, who's from Portland, bless you, to look into it. And she did a deep dive and really, I think, did some outreach to community stakeholders and came up with the report that was attached as one of your materials for today. Basically saying, it's been 5 years since you brought this forward. You've been doing it okay, and you can jump in here, doing this ad hoc with other districts and just working one by one through the kids that come in wanting this. We don't think the numbers are high enough, and we're just not sure that we should be doing this at the state board level, because what are the implications for other districts? Is this gonna, what does this mean? Which is a bit frustrating, because we think that, my favorite is, well, there aren't that many kids that want this. Well, we aren't advertising it, because we don't have a way to Judy's point, we're not right now able to look at displacement or race as a factor. Those are, it's illegal.
Illegal
that,
to
and it
use
should
race
be.
as a factor.
Well,
But
the state law
displacement is
says
a-
we can't.
We
Right,
can't.
I mean, we cannot use, that's,
Yeah.
I think the laws were written to attempt to not exclude people because of race, and we're trying to include
Yes.
people because of race. But that's also illegal to do, because we cannot use race as a factor in decision making.
But the displacement issue or factor could be a really great one,
Right.
because of, it affects other communities as well. And there's precedent for it. The Portland Housing Bureau uses displacement.
Right.
So could we mirror it in some way?
Yeah.
So they came back with this report basically saying, figure it out, or if you're gonna do this, do more community.
I continue to think it's really interesting that our laws are about, we're not gonna talk about race, we're gonna be colorblind.
Mhm.
And I think we all know that that's not enough to confront the white supremacy in our society. And so I think that's also a deeper conversation about how do we begin to think differently about like racial equity and social justice. And we don't want to create places for more discrimination and exclusion to happen. And we also need to change the way we're doing some things to make it better. And so I know that, like Judy, you were saying before the meeting started, this bureaucratic slog of trying to how can we do this legally? How can we do what's right legally? And it's frustrating when we can't do what's right for our kids and families because
And
of,
We've met with them, prior to them issuing this officially through Gold. And said, well, it's great, we know that right now, your report says that there aren't that many interested families, but even if there's one interested family, we should make it easy to come back if that's what they want to do. And there's room in the school, right? That has to be, obviously, it can't be an overcrowded school, but, or maybe it could, I don't know, you can, but all of that said, the one thing I can share is that I'm being really intentional about making sure that this is also going in line with all the work we're doing around Albina community investments. So we're talking about Tubman relocation, we're talking about Jefferson and Gary. I know you're the chair of the FNO committee. Sorry, Director Hollins. And
committees are way less formal, it's fine.
And so how do
Center for
we,
Black Student Excellence.
yes,
Right.
and the SCBSE, and how do we push this through that process so that we're not doing all this different engagement in different places. This is relevant to that discussion.
Absolutely.
And so we're not at a place where we're doing anything with it yet, because this is still pretty new. But I'm sitting in on those meetings around the CBSE governance and just trying to make sure that this is in the bloodstream a bit more, and that we can begin having this conversation in tandem with those conversations.
I know students who wanted to go to Jeff, and I think their families have moved out to the numbers because it's just so expensive. And
And obviously transportation is a challenge, and there's other barriers here, but whatever we can do to figure this out, and we're gonna continue to push the state, but we're gonna probably have to do some work internally on our own before we get back.
But that's another good thing for us to, when we do talk to, people in the state, besides saying we need to fund the quality education model, is to say, we really need to talk about right of return as one of those priorities
Yeah.
for PBS.
On the right of return piece, and I'm assuming these kids was in our district before they left.
For their
Or their
families.
families.
Or their family were, they came back. Is there a way we could look at it, there were previous students beforehand, and then they left, and then they want to come back as another pathway into doing that way. That way you're not, I guess, well, the way I look at it, you're not bound by a lot of the other data. This was a previous student that left and wants to come back and something like.
Yeah, so just a few weeks ago, you as a board approved our package for what we call standard interdistrict transfers. And that does allow for any student who's currently enrolled in a Portland Public School and has moved out in the last year to keep their seat at their current school. And, but they still need to get permission from their home district. Now, this year, the neighboring districts, David Douglas, North Clackamas, they're really generous. They're releasing everyone, regardless of their reason, regardless of when they applied, as long as it's before the start of the school year. But other districts, including Park Rose and Reynolds, they have different rules and different timelines. So a lot of so in order to do this, we need partnership of our other districts. And our superintendent, along with Mr. Hobson, Mr. Herndon, met with superintendents from other eastern Multnomah County districts in the fall of 2019. And there's verbal consent. Everybody was agreeing to support this. It just falls into the bureaucratic cracks because of how, like, we're all supposed to follow state laws and do things in a certain way. And to my knowledge, we have not had a single student who would actually sort of fall into the return to Albina profile who has been denied. But I don't know that, and I don't know how many don't even try or don't know how to try. We really appreciated that during that first, I would say, 18 months, I know that Mr. Hobson and Herndon met with Coalfield around this issue. They met with superintendents from other districts and did other things to advocate. They helped lead a community-wide survey that they did of constituents in the fall of 2017. We had 125 responses. We got some data at that time around interest. So they were more actively involved, and then I'm sure, I don't know because I haven't spoken with them. I would like them to be updated and to know where this
The
stands.
superintendent did, sorry, I should
Wonderful.
this. Superintendent did connect with Tony earlier this week just to give him a heads up, and he was grateful that we're continuing to work on it, and they're just gonna stay close on it.
But without that connection, and I can see like everybody has limited resources. So like if it's sort of a attention to something that really isn't changing or isn't improving, might not choose to put time into it. So without their support and their help getting the word out across the community, there's a limit to what we can do legally, or what we're great at doing. As a school district, we know that we could be better at all sorts of types of outreach and family connections. And we rely heavily on our partners to fill those gaps. So I guess I'm interested in knowing what your questions are or thoughts at this time and any suggestions for how we move forward.
So one thing that comes to mind, outside of using the previous student piece, if we have a student or family that wants to come back, can we start that process? Or rather than them starting that process with their district, if they don't know, like, hey, I want to go to Tubman, and I come to Tubman, and can we initiate that process? That way, it might can help them have an easier path to get back to Albina or back to the neighborhood. That's just one thing that comes to mind when I think about how do we process certain things. And I think the outreach piece is 100% is going to have to come from everyone, right? We need to work with our partners, to get the word out. We need to work with, our community as much as we can. But I think if we continue to look at it as a collaborative effort versus a singular effort, then I think we have a much more greater reach with that. And so that's just really being intentional of working with all of our partners that, hey, you guys, this is what we're going to do, we're going to roll this out. We need your help getting the word out. And then, then we do what we can do to get the word out, and then the children follow their man.
What are there ways that we can, I know that we're trying to lobby and put some pressure on here as well. I'm not sure with OSBA if us reaching out to sort of their legislative people at OSBA as well to
Yeah,
say,
we've been, I mean, I've touched base with kind of my counterparts at the various associations on this. It's been a little while, when we were talking about, should we do this path versus, the legislative, statutory path versus the rule path, and that's where I ran into that sort of, let's not touch those statutes, it gets murky
Yeah.
real fast. And they had just sunsetted, and so that's when we shifted gears, and I do think it's probably still the best route, is through
absolutely.
the state
Yeah.
board. We haven't picked back up on any advocacy on that front, because we had this report done, I thought that the outcome might be different.
Yeah.
But I don't think it presupposes that, I don't think we can't do that, I think we just need to do a little bit more work as a district first,
Okay.
since it's been 5 years since we initially had the conversation.
Yeah, and I think, the pandemic has pushed a lot of things
Everything,
off people's
yeah.
minds and off people's plates and.
Totally, and I think, the way that we could bring them back into the fold is the wildfire districts conversation, is that, because many of our associations are, they represent 197 school boards and
Right.
197 school districts, or however it's going on.
But there's been replacement with wildfire, I mean, I think.
But there's other more,
Yeah.
maybe rural, specific to rural areas, or tribal lands, right,
Yeah.
where this could apply. And so, are there ways to partner up to talk about this beyond just a sort of Portland problem, or not problem, but, opportunity?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think
we can
that's-
do that.
And if there's ways that we can be helpful as board members to
Yeah.
kind of.
And then I think, my ask for you, Director Hollins, would just be to think about ways, not to put more work on you, but just to, in your back of your mind, think about ways that we could continue to push this out through this other Albina conversation that we're having, since you're spearheading a lot of this in your committee.
Because Michelle Pick's the person that's gonna be on the Center for Black Excellence team.
I volunteered,
I know Herman did too after you got off the call. Sure.
so I think I don't know who else is on there. I know we're supposed to be getting a meeting soon.
Because that's another place to just.
And we actually
make sure
did we did have one meeting already, to kind of talk about that, so I think.
For the governance piece of it.
Yeah, the governance piece, I think as we continue to have those conversations, making sure that the right to return piece is, like you said, embedded in that, all that, in that conversation as well, with the Tubman and the Jefferson modernization.
Yeah,
It's the whole Albina piece.
I think it'll just, the more I talk about it with you and the more we talk about it, the
Yeah.
more it'll percolate into these other, kind of get in there.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be really important to have that pathway to let them know, that, hey, you can do this, or you can do that. We'll be having those conversations. The first thing is how we,
Mhm.
right? And so if we have a path, let's say, well, we come to Tubman, we'll start the process there, and, some basic kid is maybe there, but, as we work into the process, they're not.
They can stay.
Yeah, they're not losing, educational hours, things like that. So I think if we have a path that we can give them the option on, then it'll be easier for them to, get that word out. Okay, this is how the option is here, and then we'll get that one. So at least give them those options.
And PTAs will be another good place.
Yeah.
We're hearing from the Dr. Martin Luther King Junior PTA about this too. So anyway, even though those parents are already active in that
Yeah.
school, so they're already in the district, everybody knows people,
Yeah.
and people have left. So how do we pull them back if we can
All right.
and let them know that it's an option?
Or people who are still at King but may not go to high school,
They might not
right?
stay,
If
yeah,
they're
or they
from,
might, they're still there, but they've moved, but they can stay for this, at this point, but then they
Right.
can't jump over to them.
So on paper, the enrollment at Boyd Daly and Humboldt, which is historically African American, is only 3% of students who live in other districts. But anecdotally, and you talk to anybody who's involved with that school, they'll be like, we just have a lot of families who
Using another,
use Auntie's address, they do what they need to do.
absolutely.
And I mean, part of that is, we don't question it. My office also does the address investigation, so we have to accept, right, in some places. But we'd also love a path that allowed people to not have to do that.
Right.
And to not feel like the way in for you has to be through a different door. right?
That there has to be secrecy around, like,
And a
Is
lack
that
of
something-
honesty and trust from the beginning.
Is that something like a policy piece that we could do here? Or do that have to be at the state level as far
A
as?
policy piece
like we
regarding,
could say you can, I think that's what we're talking about is we'd love to give people the right to return, but if they don't use their aunt's address, then they have to, their school district has to release them, which we can't guarantee
Right.
unless we make the rule change. And we have to say that our rules allow them to enter, which there's only so many spots of the regular transfer, and when their office is deciding that, they can't use certain criteria as factors to say, this is the group of students we will accept to transfer in.
Ms. Gary mentioned, and I spoke with her several times during this process. Several of the things we talked about did not show up in the report, which was confusing to me. But she mentioned several times that she thought this is something that could be resolved through an MOU or something like an
Oh,
intergovernmental agreement between the districts. Now, that's a whole other level of work.
Yeah.
And I, as the intergovernmental committee.
Yeah.
we need a place
That would
that-
be, yeah, the place to look at, you know.
I think within that, like, then I guess I take that as permission from the state to go and carve, an agreement that meets our needs, that's a Portland thing, or at least a Multnomah County thing. And while we still couldn't acknowledge race as a primary factor, because the Supreme Court, and that, much more liberal Supreme Court
Yeah.
has told us for many years that race cannot be a primary factor in individual student assignment. But that is another path that we could pursue instead of trying to find the magic path to approval at the state level,
Right.
which I'm sorry that we even have to do that. But I also think that if this is an Eastern Multnomah County, primarily Eastern Multnomah County issue, if other districts are willing and if we had expertise in crafting an agreement, then yeah, and it is yet another thing to manage.
And I mean, it is ODE saying, this is your region, you guys, I mean, they are saying
And
this
that's
is a
kind of-
PPS policy, and this is a PPS
They're
opportunity.
kind of like, figure this out, you guys can also figure this out on your own without intervention.
That's what, yeah,
Is
so
kind
I
of
do
what that
think,
report says.
I do think an MOU with our, I mean, I think that's the path is if we have a verbal agreement from the other soups, can we
Just
write and create an MOU with our neighbor districts about displacement? I think that's the clear path forward and try to come up with something, because again, if we try to work with ODE or try the legislative pathway, we're just gonna continue, it'll take forever, we'll continue to be in the bureaucratic nightmare. Not that this won't be a bureaucratic nightmare, but this would be a shorter one to try to say.
Well, if they're all
if people are
amenable, and, you know,
displaced,
they
yeah.
have been,
Right.
Well,
then
and
it's just paperwork.
again, just
Yeah.
making sure that we are circumventing the standard interdistrict
Yes,
process in
Yeah.
order to achieve this, and the state is comfortable with that, then
let's do it. I think we should do that, yeah. I think we should circumvent the standard interdistrict transfer process. I think it's the right thing for our families to be able to return to Albina. I think talk about the white supremacy and the freeway and the historic displacement that continues to this day. But I think this is one way to right a wrong that has been done.
Yeah.
And so to,
And then it will,
but then it also affects like these in tribal communities and others who have also been displaced.
and I think then, you know, our job, if we're not gonna pursue the state pathway, and we're gonna do it on our own duties and paperwork, then it's still on us to do the communication and the,
Absolutely.
you know, the outreach to let folks know.
But I also think it's
Super
once
hard.
again on us as to be a leader in the state.
Yeah.
Because what we do with our neighbor districts around displacement, other communities might then mirror with their own, whether it's wildfire or tribal lands or other places of displacement.
And then we can take that opportunity, if it makes sense, to say, hey, look, who else is doing it, let's get this on the books.
I think we've got to be the leaders here because it sounds like ODE has said,
Well, there's a lot of initiatives.
yes.
They're busy too.
They're very busy, but on this issue, they said, this is y'all, you
They
figured
pretty
it
much
out.
said,
Yeah,
local, it was kind of local.
local control, which is fine,
Which
because
is, we like that, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
so what, I mean, I think the question is what can we as board members do to support this work?
And my question for Judy is, do we need to ask permission or ask for forgiveness?
Forgiveness.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert, so I am not like your answer. I mean,
I love it.
memorandum of understanding is outside of what I normally
Yeah.
do, so,
We could ask,
I think we need to pull
I
legal
can
in.
ask Kate and Liz, whoever has time.
Yeah.
And might be Kate too, and she's worked at OSBA in the past, so she could help maybe think through what that could look like.
secondly, I think, I don't know if MESD still, routinely, convenes, meetings of, East County superintendents.
They do,
Okay, so I
Regularly.
think this needs to be on the agenda.
so I can work on that.
And then, and then, maybe we have a draft and something, like, we need to put some, something on the bones
Yeah.
for review.
So what I can do is, I will find out, they meet monthly. I don't know when their next meeting is, they had one not that long ago, but I'll ask when the next one is, and it may be too soon, but we can figure out, that parallel, talk to Kate, figure out what a draft could look like, and then match up how soon we can get that from her with the next meeting or the next meeting after that.
Great. Okay, yeah, so I think it'd be wonderful to have an update on the progress at our next intergovernmental mini meeting. And we can.
Do we have a June meeting or is it skipping?
We should have a June meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. Because after July, then that's when our committee assignments change, so,
Yes, 22nd.
yeah. Okay, so June 22nd, I think it'd be great to get an update and what else we as board members can do to support that work, maybe. Because I don't know if other school districts are gonna have to pass this MOU, so we might do some work connecting with our school board peers.
And I'll connect with my counterpart and I guess we work together.
That would be really wonderful, and, bringing it back and connecting it to the Albina investment, I think is so valuable. I've seen and felt, the reaction of, community members who see the investments and can be proud of them, but also have that sense of, but where was it?
Yeah.
Why is it taking so long, and actually, who's gonna benefit?
Right.
Yeah.
Is it, and so I think the vision is for people who may, through different circumstances, not be in our district anymore. If our city is trying to help people get re-anchored in the community,
Yeah.
our partnership in that, just through this little thing even, could be really meaningful, especially to families with kids.
Mason, we all just kind of hop in a lot, so I just wanted to make sure to create space if you had anything to add, but don't feel like you have to.
I've been more of just trying to understand. So like, I guess I'm just a little confused, like, with like right to return. So could they, like, not like if it's only for families that were in the district of a school and then moved out and still want to.
So like if your grandma went there, like if your grandma went to Jefferson, but your family, had to move out of PBS due to gentrification or your house was taken, your family could then apply to come back.
Okay.
And even though you live in, Park Road School District, you could go to Jefferson.
If you have family.
Yeah, so
Okay.
if you've been displaced from Albina.
Well, that's really awesome. I think that I don't really know the whole bureaucratic process.
Yeah, that's what we want to have happen. That's
Yeah.
not, we're there's lots of rules we have to sort of
Mhm.
follow and make sure we're like behaving legally to
And
do
then
it
the
properly.
rules are in place, there's a reason to have interdistrict transfer rules and, we can't just let anybody come in anytime. We have to, we have budgets and all of that stuff. However, we shouldn't make it so hard to come back to where like there's a legacy.
Mhm.
That's what we're trying to solve for.
No, I know like plenty of students that have had those issues where they will, like you were talking about, use different family members'
Mhm.
addresses and would either do it successfully or get caught and be turned away
It
from the
happens
school.
probably a lot more than we think.
And I think with Albina, and we can talk about native displacement as well, but there was this vibrant historic district here in Portland that was, Gary can speak more about this, the thriving center of the Black community. And the land was taken for a hospital, for the Moda Center, for this building, a freeway was put through it. So there was this sort of intentional extermination of the Black community. in Portland. And so it's like, what can we as institutions do now? We can't go back in time and undo all of that, but what can we do now? What are the decisions we can make now to sort of begin to say that was wrong and we want to continue to support Albina and a vibrant Black community in Portland? Is that fair?
Perfect.
And on the other end of that, from July 2017, from the record, that evening, Reverend Dr. Leroy Haynes, representing the Albina Ministerial Alliance, supports a right to return policy to correct what has been done to the African American community. The last census indicated that 10,000 African Americans were forced out of Portland.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think I appreciate the Reverend's thoughts. I don't know that we can ever correct it. I think we can make attempts to do better or do restitution, but I don't think, I think the damage is so,
I'm just done.
the damage is done and the damage is long lasting and the trauma, but it's like, what can we do now to try to be better?
Well, we will work on it.
Yes, thank you.
That's
That's,
exciting.
I'm hopeful. I was not
Maybe,
hopeful and then now I'm hopeful.
In terms of how to, does this need to come, there's not a decision obviously right now. Do we want to just, as we get more information and as we continue the process with the CBE/CBSE, whatever we're gonna call it, but it's all so confusing. Maybe at a point where we're doing an update on that, we talk about this at the full board.
I do think it would be, I think the MOU will have to come before the board
Yeah,
at some
definitely.
point, so I think to have a heads up on that,
Okay.
that's what we're working on.
I'm sure it won't be before the next meeting.
And at the next board meeting, I will have a very brief update. We know it's gonna be a long meeting because we're voting on the budget and
yes.
SCGC,
Oh,
so,
yeah. I'm busy that day.
yes, you probably should be, but I'll give a brief update on this at the board as well.
And we can kind of tease it out too at 4, have our facility
Yeah, you
evaluation.
can mention it then too.
Getting, gonna have a report about the time rescission anyway, so we can kind of mention this.
Yeah, that's
there
great.
too,
That's a great
so
idea.
as we go
Yeah,
through
because
it.
everything on that agenda fits nicely. So.
Yeah.
Perfect.
In the meantime, we are in the middle of yet another cycle, right?
Oh.
So now is the time when we inform families. Now is the time when families are working with their districts to get permission. We have pledged to, we've identified all the students in our historically Black schools. I don't know the students by race, I just have a list. But we have pledged to go ahead with, they'll get an email, they'll get a letter home, we'll also follow up with a phone call.
Okay.
To make sure that they understand the process, have any questions. What we provide is how to get in contact, like the contact person for the resident district, and we share their name and information with the resident district. What we have never done is applied on their behalf,
Right.
right? But I almost feel like at some point, it's like, that's kind of,
The next
Maybe the
step,
next step.
we'd
Yeah.
really like all you need to say is, this is what I want.
Right.
and then we take care of the bureaucracy.
Yeah,
That would be great.
isn't that what bureaucrasts should be good at doing?
Yes,
Yeah,
especially with one
Get
that
rid of
like.
that red tape.
Yes, Judy, that's a brilliant idea, thank you.
And you say you found out what, are we using text as well, as far as texting that information out to families?
I need to learn more about that.
You can do it through comms,
We could do it through comms.
just like when we do other
I
stuff.
think the text
And you can do it
piece
by
is a
school.
huge way to get the word out.
Yes.
I know you're always on your phone, so using the texting as well should be a great option.
No,
I only answered like 5 texts during this meeting, and
Yeah.
Yeah, there are
I
ways
left
to
my
do.
phone downstairs so I would listen
You're
to
so
you.
better than
I only do that for board. But that's a great reminder, and growth for my team, right? Because we're always trying to figure that out. Everybody on my team doesn't have district phones, so then they're like, well, I'm not texting from my.
Yeah, don't text from your personal, but if you could do it through comms, then.
Well, we could
We'd
do
figure
some
it out.
kind of, we can talk about this
Yeah.
offline, but there are ways to send text just to certain school communities. So there's
Okay.
for sure a way to do
Okay.
information sharing that way. It may not be a way to get, for them to get back to us through text,
Right,
but
right,
it
but
could say,
they show you
here's the information,
right.
for more, you could call this
Yeah.
number or visit the
Just
website.
use it as another tool
Yeah.
of getting the word out. I think it's important.
Yes.
So I will just pledge to you that my team and I will do everything we can to make sure that no student, we don't want anybody to be left out of this process, but particularly the kids who are seeking Albina schools. are not left out of this process, even while you're giving us this guidance and we're gonna go work through a new way to do it that's gonna make it better in the future. But we're in the middle of it and we don't want, like, this would be the worst time,
Right.
right? To say, well, the rule will be better later, but too bad for you now. So we'll do our best.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Judy.
Okay.
All right,
Go check my
well, I
phone.
feel like we made progress there, so thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
next
it's good.
up,
Thank you.
Courtney, is our legislative agenda, which is exciting. I love the way they're
Yeah.
connected to our citizenship.
Well, that's the old one.
That's the old one,
Yeah.
that's the 20.
So I'll give you, so here's where we are.
Oh, that's right.
It's May.
Yeah.
Our next legislative session is in 2023 in February.
So we've got some
So
time.
but things, the summer kind of takes a big gap
Yep.
out of our timeline. And we wanna, and I'm still working through the date details with Roseanne, but basically we would like an agenda approved before Thanksgiving,
Yes.
so that we can start shopping it around before Christmas and the other holidays. Because once January hits and,
Oh,
it's
it's
just
done at that point.
it's like sort of game on.
Yeah.
And, we wanna socialize it with legislators and have time to do that. So the plan right now is to have the full board adopt the legislative agenda before Thanksgiving.
I just totally ignored the dates on all of this. I was like, why are we asking for more COVID funding?
So
I
what
guess
we're doing,
we
so what
still
that
have-
was meant to do is give you, to remind you what we
What
had
we did last
before.
year, yeah.
And we have typically not done a short session legislative agenda, we didn't do it this time, we will probably start doing that in the future, but for lots of reasons, we didn't do it this year,
Yeah.
lot going on. So what we do in the long session is where the magic happens anyway, that's, cause let's be honest, what we need the most is more money.
Yes.
So what we generally double down on in our legislative agenda is budget, 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 and then all these other important things that are tied to the budget. Because
Yes.
everything we do costs money. If it's people, it's money. If it's program, it's money because it's people. It's always people.
Yeah.
So, and you guys know this very well from our own internal budget conversation.
And I think, in here, what we had for last year was a 5.5% increase, which
Yeah.
I think is right in alignment.
And we didn't land there, so
No, we did
we
not.
advocated for it.
Right.
We, and this is an issue that is complicated, but I want to bring it to you guys, and you know about the CSL. But
Yeah.
it's a
Do you know about the CSL?
I'm gonna give you the very basic version, because it has taken me a long time to get this right, but, and it's not actually that complicated, it's just hard to explain.
It is.
So the way that the Legislative Fiscal Office and the Department of Administrative Services, who build budgets for state agencies, the way in which they calculate current service level for a school district, the roll-up costs for the next biennium, they start with the current cost, they roll it up for the next year, they add some inflation on, some numbers. But they do all these calculations on PERS, on healthcare costs, on salaries, all of it. And the best way I can explain it is that the inputs that the Legislative Fiscal Office and DAS, Department of Administrative Services, use to calculate what schools need, they're wrong.
Yeah.
They're wrong. And school
That's a good
districts
way to explain.
school districts know what we need for our students, but they don't match up. So the way that the state starts low. They start estimating what we need at their lowballing. We need them to start higher, because if you can't start here, you're never gonna get here. If you start here, you're gonna get to here. We always get more than we thought, I should say, we ask for the moon, you get somewhere in here.
Yeah.
We need to continue to hit that drum with them, that steady drumbeat. It's falling on deaf ears a bit.
I would say
Because-
that Rita Moore is very
Yes,
invested
this
in
is her thing.
CSL. This is her thing,
Yep.
and she is happy now that she's retired and home bored.
I will reach out to
She
her.
is happy to go to Salem. She
Yes.
is happy to write letters. She has. I know she's offered that to Deputy
Yeah.
Superintendent Hertz.
I'll reach out to Rita, because that's a good reminder. This has been
And this is
important.
her, like, the only reason I understand it is because she's explained it to me like 30 times and I don't understand it super well, but she might be a good asset to
Yeah.
deploy as a former board member who has time on her hands to really do some advocacy work around
And
CSL.
that's happening right now. There's a work
Yeah.
group, there's a conversation happening in the legislative sphere right now about CSL.
Yeah.
And we're working with our partners at various associations to get a letter out before the middle of June to say that we really, yes, we have ESSER dollars. Thanks, that's federal government. We appreciate it.
But
They're
those are
going to
almost
end.
out, yeah.
Thank you for Student Success Act, but to your point, 4% of our budget.
Yeah.
Thank you for all these investments, and it's not enough.
Right.
And if we are, and we had a pandemic come in the middle of this, even if we did take
Even if
ESSER
we
out of
didn't
it,
have the
even if we
pandemic,
didn't, I mean, it is it costs more to do business. It costs more to play school, as Olympe always says,
Play school.
than it used to. It's just more expensive to serve students.
And I don't, you graduated similarly to a timeline when I did, Gary, but, Oregon really with Measure 5.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I know that the things that were available in my elementary experiences and even in my high school
Yes.
experiences are not, in Salem Kaiser, are not things that we can afford
We
now.
are supplementing with local option. We are
Yes.
supplementing with the arts tax. I'm thinking about, I was just heard that my Fabian's gonna have a music teacher next year.
Yay!
Woo! But that's because of the arts tax.
Yeah.
It's not anything, the state shouldn't get credit for that.
No.
They didn't give us that money. And so
And we're
very
so
grateful.
fortunate
We're very
in
grateful for
Portland
what we're
that
getting.
that
But-
Portland has done these things to
Yes.
help augment what the
Mhm.
state provides. And that,
And we have an
especially-
equity formula.
we have an equity formula, but also like the state of Oregon should be funding the quality education model.
And I think it's just a battle because there are so many priorities, right?
Yes,
We've
there's
got
a lot.
housing insecurity, we've got issues,
Absolutely.
we've got higher ed needs, we've got public safety needs, there's all these things and we're all going after the same pot. And then you have a revenue forecast like we had today,
Yes.
and you're thinking, number one, why do we have a kicker, but that's all other matter.
The kicker.
I wish we could just tackle kicker reform, but it's just one of those things that we're
Right.
gonna have to live with for a while, I think. But I think, we have this opportunity as we look ahead where we have historic revenues again and again and again. I mean, it's 8 times we've had, a positive revenue forecast in the
So
last
why are our
couple years.
schools
So
struggling
why
as
are
much
we
as we
having
are?
these conversations?
Because we don't have a stable funding plan.
And then we get into
Yeah.
trouble and we get into fights about class size, and that's just like, to me, a red herring. I mean, that's not the issue. The issue is funding.
Yeah.
And we
Oh,
haven't-
the issue's absolutely
We
funding.
haven't funded schools properly for 30 years.
So, when you talk about the legislative session, it starts in February,
February 1st.
and this is the short session.
Long.
No, it's
Well,
the
long
long.
session, and that goes through when?
Generally through middle of June, depending, but constitutionally, it's gotta end by the 4th of July. So it's about a 5-month session. There's legislative days, interim days, they call them organizational days, leading up to that. So we'll have legislative days in September and November. That's where they do some preliminary hearings and kind of, meetings and deal making that happens
So,
prior to session to get organized.
so you're saying you want us to do a legislative agenda by when?
I think we would like to have a draft for you to review by September. Do some outreach. So what we haven't done I think we could do a better job of our outreach with students on this. Parents are looking for stuff to do
Yeah, we
right
should
now.
have
in
it.
our
I would
budget.
love if we could organize an advocacy day
Yes, yeah.
to encourage students and parents
We will
to
for
go.
sure be able to do that.
I know other districts do that.
And we've done it in the past where we've worked with other districts and, the last couple of years have been hard.
So
But I think that's definitely doable, and I would love, this is just an idea I came up with today, but I would love, we used to do a legislative training here for staff, just to understand like how you can, there's so many people here that have information that I need to do my job in Salem,
Yes.
like, I'm not an expert on anything, right? I mean, but,
Being
I'm
fabulous.
this deep, right? And so I need to talk to Judy about transfers, I need to go talk to Dan about bond. So there's a lot of people, but a lot of people don't know how the process works, so we've done legislative trainings here. I'd like to take that on the road and do PTA trainings
Yeah.
and get our parents involved in the process, because they don't wanna hear from me. The
Yeah.
legislators wanna hear from people who are really experiencing this stuff on the ground.
Yeah, it would be great to get our DSC and
Yeah.
irony and everybody
so
engaged in that as well.
We've started, Lisa and I have started making our document with all the stuff in it, brain dump document, but some of the things on there are, talking with Yen and the DSC and engaging schools through that, that pathway. Engaging with our, community, the community engagement team, our family engagement through Jamal, family engagement team, our PTAs, there's all this stuff that we haven't had enough bandwidth, I haven't had enough bandwidth to
Yeah.
do in the past, and so.
People are super
there's a lot of-
passionate and I'd rather have them yell at our legislators than at me.
Well, and the woman I talked to last night from Hammers, I texted her and I was like, I need you to help me in Salem, I need parents, and she's an organizer. People like that want to be productive. The other thing is, all this energy around school foundations, we need to harness that for legislative
Yeah.
good. You know, there's a lot that can come out of that conversation.
Absolutely.
The reason that we even have local school foundations is because we've never invested in schools,
Right.
or at least 30 years.
If we were fully funded, we would.
Yeah,
So
and
you were
so,
gonna say something else,
Hold
though?
on, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, like, so you're saying like the call for more funding has fallen on deaf ears,
it's,
and I feel like, I mean, a lot of legislators, at least the ones I've talked to, will just like immediately point to the student success
Yes,
app,
right.
and I wanted to ask how much of an impact has that made?
It's
on
4% of
You
our
know,
budget.
we're grateful for it because it is allowing us to hire more social and emotional supports for students, particularly, like especially around counseling, school psychs. It's, and right now, coming out of, you know, remote learning, that is a huge need.
Mhm.
So we are not saying, don't do
We're
this for
very
us.
grateful. It's amazing.
We just want more. We need
Yeah.
more. I mean, our students are struggling. Students that didn't have issues before the pandemic, you know, because the Student Success Act passed
Pre-pandemic.
in 2019. So right when we were getting off the ground is when everything shut down. And so we're now seeing the need has only increased, and it's not like the Student Success Act isn't keeping pace with the need.
Mhm.
It wasn't meant to solve all of our problems. It was meant to supplement.
And it was targeted specifically towards students of color,
Yes.
houseless students,
Yep.
students struggling with mental health issues. There are two other.
Targeted subgroups that are,
Yeah.
you know, have higher needs.
Mhm.
And again, that 4% is great. It's not gonna fill the gaps.
Yeah.
And then ESSER, the federal dollars that we got, the pandemic relief dollars,
Mhm.
that's also amazing and it's a lot of money, but it goes away in 2024, we have to spend it. And we're trying to invest it, at least as the budget's proposed, trying to invest it in things that we don't have to sustain the same way that we would have to sustain, for example, like a bunch of new teachers.
Mhm.
Because that money's, then where's that money coming from after 2024? So a lot of the legislative conversation is, number one, with our budget
Mhm.
proposal, how are you, why are you unassigning teachers in an environment like this? Because we don't have the kids, we're losing, our enrollment is down. And because we have one-time resources that are great and we're thankful, and they're going away. So we have to plan for the future where like, I think Norberto likes to say, we're trying to step down instead of a cliff. Because the cliff is what we've experienced in the past with recessions. You start planning to spend money and then you don't have that money anymore and the programs still
I was
exist.
talking to Roberto about it yesterday, actually, and I mean, I got the main hope is all on getting more funding from our state legislature in this upcoming legislative session, otherwise we're gonna have big financial problems.
Yeah.
And so I don't think like parents and students alike are gonna realize like the need for that.
I think that's why I think we need to do more engagement around it.
Yeah, because I think like parents will fight if they understand it's the
Yeah.
legislators, and people love getting mad at the
Oh,
legislators.
yeah, I mean, and I don't mean to take all eyes off of the district, but we get blamed for a lot of things. This is not something, we didn't create this problem, Measure 5 created it. Bill Sizemore created it.
Well, and I'm looking at the 2018 Quality Education Model Funding Report from the state of Oregon, and it's showing like a 20% gap between.
And it's a newer version, it's 2020, I'll send it to you.
Okay, where we're funded and where we actually land.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty significant gap, and we're lucky in Portland again because we have these other things that help us, but that's
And
a
we
pretty
appreciate, right,
significant.
thank you Portland voters for constantly paying property taxes to support teachers.
Thank you to Julia who worked really hard on getting the Student Success Act passed, like we're very grateful for that, and it's the first step in.
And we are, just so you know, we are in the process of getting an analysis from Piper Sandler, used to be Piper Jaffray. Like what's our capacity in local option? Because as we're having the state conversation, let's also be having the conversation about what we're able to do locally.
Yeah.
And then, we'll continue to fight the other things that are part of this old legislative agenda, and I don't expect that to change, are things like the Seismic Rehab grants, right? We've been able to seismically modernize a school every couple of years because of this grant pool, which is not everything, and there are a lot of parents that have kids in buildings that are unreinforced masonry, but we're doing what we can with what we have.
Right.
And we're doing it's incremental, but we'll continue to support things like the school modernization grant program, where if we pass a bond, we can get a match up to 8%. So there are ways to supplement what we're doing, but it takes advocacy, and we'll continue to fight for that stuff. And then, of course, I mean, the special ed cap, there's all these things that are just broken, and we'll continue to.
How much, I mean, I know that Council of Great City Schools is really where we leverage our federal.
Yes.
Because I think that that's, we talk about our Oregon legislative agenda, which is super important, but also, I'm interested in our USDA waiver. I'm interested in broadband as a public utility. Third thing that I'm not thinking of right now.
Money for
IDEA.
all those people coming out of Balmer. How are they gonna work?
Yeah, well, IDEA is another, like, fully funding IDEA, because IDEA is supposed to pay, what is it, 60 or 70% of sped costs? That's why it was created, and it pays 17.
I can't remember what the percentage is, but
Yeah, it
it's
only
low.
pays 17%. So, because it's never been fully funded. So those kinds of things of, how do we fund our kids?
Yeah.
On the federal level as well.
And the other thing that the Student Success Act, you mentioned the USDA waivers, which is gonna be a battle to get those extended.
Yeah.
But the Student Success Act also, increased eligibility for the state level we did get a little help there, so I don't wanna forget that, because there was a lot of.
And our legislators have worked really hard and done a lot for us, and they are facing down the same 30-year. And, when Gary, a couple of years ago, we got this chart that showed every building in PPS when it was built, and whenever there was a major, remodel done on it, and there was a 50-year gap.
Yeah.
So we sort of let
And
things.
That would be the other thing I would add to your federal agenda is full infrastructure.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't included in infrastructure packages that have been floating around, and not for lack of effort.
Right.
We have made that point very clear with our delegation. We're lucky here. Our delegation loves schools. They love to
they do.
support our
Yeah.
schools. But in a time like this where it's 50-50 and we've got the filibuster, it's just really hard to get it.
It's really hard.
Which is why the USDA waiver thing is probably not going anywhere. I'm hopeful still that it's a bipartisan issue and that they can figure it out, but Pollyanna, isn't gonna get everything done, so.
It'd be great if we could, as a nation, say, yes, we're gonna feed our children.
So, a couple questions.
Sure.
The quality education model, where did they put that at, as far as number wise per student?
Yeah, I will have to get back to you, I don't have it pulled up, but it's, this is the Quality Education Commission is a commission of the state, the governor, appoints people to it, and they do calculations to get us to it.
So, if we can get that number one, and also, I'm wondering, what percentage of the Student Success Act would go, what percentage would that number would be for the QEM?
You mean what percentage of the QEM is the Student Success Act?
What it could be.
Okay.
So where it should be at, so as an example, it's 20,000 a kid,
Mhm.
and we're getting $2,000 a month for Student Success Act. That's, 2% or whatever, 10%, that could be discussion to say, well, we got this Student Success Act, but it's only 10% of what the QEM should be.
Yeah.
Right? And so.
Right, and then if you take the state school fund, where are we short?
Right.
Yeah.
And then when we're looking at crafting our acts, then maybe not just doing at the QM, it may be when we're asking for these things, these things makes up that gap.
Yeah.
Also, where are there PAT and other unions, where are they in support of the QEM? Are they supportive of the QEM?
Oh, yeah, I mean, the folks that we work with at the legislative level on funding, it's the Oregon Education Association, PAT is an affiliate member, and we're not always on the same page about everything. Generally, we're in line, but
We have more
sometimes,
in common than we don't.
definitely, for sure. Where it gets tricky is teacher contract issues, things like that,
Right.
but with budget, we're aligned,
Okay.
more.
And the reason why I asked that question is because, when we're looking at how do we lobby the legislature, having that, of course, that group,
Mhm.
but having them reach out to those teachers, having the teachers reach out to those parents,
Yeah.
and start doing like a real groundswell of support or movement.
And aligning.
And, right, to do that. And also, look at, so when the election cycle, usually with police like the governor is in November.
Mhm.
If we're having a legislative agenda in September, and then we have a lot of
New members.
members and stuff coming in November. It would be great if, I don't know if we can do that, if as an educational piece, holding a candidate forum
Yes.
for our district,
We
right?
could also do, to not get into, I love that idea, we could also do, to not get into trouble, well, we wouldn't get into trouble, we have to be careful with elections.
Yeah.
As staff and as
Yeah, I
board
mean,
members.
we're not
But what we could
supporting
do-
any particular
yeah.
person, but
We
we're
could
having it
do,
for an educational purpose for our kids.
Or
our
we could do a
students.
welcome to, there are gonna be a lot of new members of the legislature coming
Well,
in.
I'm talking about before
Oh, like,
the
oh,
election.
yeah,
Yeah, before the election, and then maybe follow up.
Mhm.
In my mind, I'm thinking if we doing it before the election. So we're having a candidate forum for our educational, for our kids, for our parents, teachers, staff, whoever, to kind of get to know who they are, ask them these different questions. So now you have one accountability for when after November.
you heard from us, now what are
Right,
you gonna do
this is
for
what
us?
you, this is what you said
Mhm.
to yada, 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 excuse me. And then, maybe come back in spring or whenever that long session is in April, May, say, hey, we appreciate you coming to the candidate forum, this is what you said, what are you going, or how
Yeah,
is this
I love that.
progressing?
And we could partner with, we co-hosted events, so we did it's been a while, we did a candidate forum, town hall kind of thing at Roosevelt a few years ago. I feel like pre-pandemic, my memory, it doesn't
I think
exist, but
especially with the governor stuff, if
But
we
yeah.
don't have a new governor either way, I think it would be great to put something like that together this year.
yeah,
And then along with the other candidates that's coming, just be coming in, and then that way, like I say, I look at the accountability piece, right?
Yeah.
Looks like we're gonna have our fourth female governor of Oregon.
Right.
yeah,
I
either
say
way,
fourth
right?
because I don't know if y'all know this, but the governor of Oregon got like a job out in, east. And when he got that job, and this is in like the 1800s, he left his secretary in charge, so she was acting governor. She was the acting governor until they could hold a new election, so
I
I
don't
was.
want to offend the men in the room, but that's about right.
Man.
So I told Barbara Roberts once, I said, you're really the second female governor, and she laughed at me. She's like, you're like one of 10 people that knows. This is what you get when you study politics. You learn all these
All these
weird
facts.
facts. Yeah.
They
Wow.
come in handy though.
They do.
That is
interesting.
But I love that idea, Gary, and we will, Director Hollins, and we will pursue that, because I think there's that could be a partnership with some of our culturally specific organizations, like everybody wants,
Everyone could
that
be able
time.
to bring that in,
That'd be
but
wonderful.
everybody will
We could
have
even
access
do-
at some point.
since we are student-centered, we could even, do something with like Next Up.
Oh, yeah.
With Alana,
Maybe with our DSC too.
Yeah. and co-host it with the
Team
DJs.
And it'd be great, and it'd be great to
Yeah.
do it like at one of our new schools that's,
Yeah.
whether
Daniels.
McDaniels, yeah, somewhere.
That's a great idea.
So that way
We'll
we
look into
get the accountability piece, I think it's there, and then follow up when we doing, when they come in ready to welcome or what have you, or we have legislation day going down there, hey, this is what you guys said, this is what we expecting from you, and at least starts that process, and I don't have a problem with, even saying, hey, especially the ones in our district, if you can't get this done, I get it, maybe we need to find somebody else to get it done. And you just, because it's going on for a long time of underfunding our kids, and I keep saying this all the time. I know, man, the virtual always go back and forth with whether the well or the high, and I tell them, I say, well, when it's a priority for us, we find a well to dig.
Yeah.
And so, well, we might be working with a pie now, but it's, like I said.
Can we get a well?
Right, if it's something that somebody wants, all of a sudden the well sprouts up somewhere, and you get something gets done, so.
You're right.
Um,
Well, yeah, we will, we'll definitely look into that. We've got some time, but I think it's good to put those feelers out early.
yeah,
And
I think a great candidate forum would be awesome.
And as we talk about, all the other issues with the state, housing, being one of the foremost climate crisis stuff, I think education for me is still the key, that it's fundamental, and those students are gonna be the ones that help us solve climate crisis and housing. So yeah, investing in the education helps us have fewer crises later on, I think, as well. So
I mean, the education piece is what helps houselessness, right? It what helps safety, right? People
mental health
working.
wraparounds help.
Right, it helps all that
Yeah.
stuff, so that should be the foundation that we're investing in.
Yeah.
Versus,
We unfortunately haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't been, and I think we
Trying.
see that. in
People
our
mean
state.
well, but.
Yeah. And I have to say, I feel like I got an excellent education in the state of Oregon. I don't know how you feel about your school experience.
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
I did. I did. I just wish it was, the only issue is I didn't feel like my kids would get the same education that I,
Yeah.
and that was what was really disappointing.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was really disappointing. And, my daughter, my youngest daughter, she decided that, last year that she didn't feel she was getting an education to get her ready for college.
Mhm.
And she wanted to switch schools. And we moved her to a school where she felt that she could get that from.
Yeah.
And that was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, it was great because her mindset was there, but it was just like, wow, like, how could that be?
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
Right, that she's
was-
advocating for herself,
Yeah.
but it's hard.
but that's hard to
yeah.
understand, like, what the heck is going on, And so, I mean, my vision, is I don't see why we can't be like the number one school district. Why we couldn't have the best that we have to offer our kids right here,
Mhm.
right? We have resources, we have support that we received the bond that just passed.
Yeah.
The levies get passed, even though I hate seeing my tax bills. But it gets passed, and like I was telling people, I said, we have these conversations around November time, every time the family, get together, and we always talking about the tax bill that comes up. We own some properties in North Portland, and the thing is, this last one that came up, and I don't know if that's because I was on the board at that time or not. It was more of we wouldn't have a problem paying more if we knew what our kids was going to be getting with their quality education.
Yeah.
And now that was like, wow, that I've never heard my family say that ever.
Mhm.
We want to invest in our kids,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I
so-
mean, we live in a really amazing place for people who
Supportive education. And I have to say, my daughter, she went to Llewellyn, to Selwood, and now she's at Cleveland, and she has had an excellent education
Yeah.
and excellent teachers and excellent opportunities. And I was saying before, like, she didn't get to take art because of the way the middle school schedule, she just, you put in for your elective, you don't get everything.
Yeah.
And because we have privilege, I was able to supplement with friends who are artists,
Yeah.
doing little like mini summer camps for her.
Yeah.
But I think the quality education model report talks about the inequities, even within PPS, but especially across the state of funding and access and resources.
And I think you just mentioned something, and I just want to call it out. The way we do school schedules is totally antiquated and outdated,
Yes.
and, obviously, again, people have to figure out summer for their kids, and it's not easy, and it's expensive. And if you don't have grandparents or somebody else to hang out with,
It's,
there are barriers to accessing all those programs. And then, of course, now we have like just staff shortages, even Parks and Rec, like, the most affordable option for a lot of families don't have enough slots.
Yeah.
So how do we also be thinking about, and I hate to say it because
Balanced
people don't like
school
it, but year-round school,
Balanced school year.
Balanced school year.
I think that is something that we should, I brought this up with the superintendent, that's something that we need to look at.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the history of
Mhm.
education and why it was brought up, and, even when we get to the breaks and.
Yeah,
spring
farming
break
and
all,
everything.
all that was there.
Farming.
We're in a whole different era now, right? This is, we
Well,
moved
you don't have a
past
farm
that.
in your backyard?
Right? I don't got no farms and I'm going to
Yeah.
no
the
plants,
harvest right
spring,
now.
or spring planting,
But
yeah.
I think planting that seed, no pun intended, now, because that's a conversation that's gonna
Yeah.
stand time, but, and I know it's out there, but we really do need to start thinking big and bold, especially coming out of this once in a generation, I hope, pandemic.
Yeah.
Once in a lifetime.
If we're not gonna start having these conversations now, then we're never gonna change the way this is done. And the childcare issues the spotlight has been shown on those this last couple of years. That especially the disproportionate impact on families of color. I think we also need to be thinking about, just and it's also a it's a safety issue. We're seeing a lot of gun violence, we're seeing a lot of unrest. If we have school all year, we just, there's fewer things for people to get into, right?
And it's not necessarily more days, I mean,
Right,
that's the
no, no,
bigger
right, but
conversation,
it's-
but the
but
way
it's-
it's designed,
Yeah.
is
You're not
actually
out of
better
school for so long.
for learning.
Yeah.
All right, I know we have
Yeah.
public comment, is there anything else? I was gonna say, in Scotland, we have the tatty holidays, potato holidays in like October, that was when the potato harvest was. So they still have the tatty holidays, they are full for a week.
Can I ask
Potato
one
harvest.
question before
Yeah.
we do the public comment? So our plan is to develop a draft for you all.
Great.
It probably won't be at the next meeting.
No,
Probably
it'll be-
after that.
yeah.
But is the direction, do you like the idea of high-level principles with some
Yes,
drill-down details?
I love
We're not gonna know all the bill numbers until February. We can't develop a legislative agenda that way. So what's worked for us in the past and what works for me personally is, and now that Lisa's on the team, to be able to have some ability to support things without having to come to the board every time during the
Mhm.
session. So if something falls into our list of principles or policy values, and it's something that's easy, like support, I don't know, I'm just thinking of an example. I supported housing, like
Yeah.
zonings,
yeah,
because it touches our work, like if
Yeah.
if you eliminate single family zoning, you get a more diverse school,
Yeah.
right? So we supported it. So my point is, and we'll
It's that
talk about this more,
intersectionality,
but
right.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But if there are things that are like, yeah, this is a no-brainer, I don't wanna have to come to the board every time because it takes time and then I
Yeah.
miss an opportunity for
Right.
us to weigh in. So just be thinking about, are we okay staying high level with values and principles, and obviously budget numbers will get concrete, but, and obviously the full board will have to approve this, but that is helpful to us.
I think
to
that's
not
the
have
best
to
way,
come
so we
ask
can be
for-
agile and supportive of what our students,
That's
I mean, I think ultimately, like Gary always says, it's about the kids.
Yes.
So if we can see that this will benefit our students, then yes.
Yeah, I think back to menstrual dignity, that was another one we weighed in on because we'd already done it at Grant.
Yeah.
And it just makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
any questions about how we?
How was your
move
first
forward?
intergovernmental committee meeting?
Oh, it's been great.
Welcome.
Picking things out.
Yeah, Lisa, just came from Representative Valderrama's office, so she knows the building, which is.
And you,
helpful.
and Representative Valderrama has some school board,
Yes,
connections
some
as
chops.
well, so you
Yeah.
understand that.
I'm looking forward to it. Putting on the agenda.
All right, Ms. Brenta, I see we have some public comment.
Yes, we have Rosie Boyer.
All right, Ms. Boyer, welcome.
Thank you so much. And I'm Rosie Boyer, Boyer, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. And I'm speaking today on behalf of the Black-led Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary PTA. Tiffany and Tyler both wished very much that they could be making this public comment, but Tiffany commented last week and Tyler's commenting this evening. So I offered to step in to do this. I also want to just thank you all so much for your work, for Judy for keeping me up to date on all of this, and just your conversation in general has been very, very encouraging for me listening in, and I know that the rest of the team will feel that way as well. So I'm going to read my statement now. The albino right to return is more critical than ever as we see record amounts of money being spent on historically Black albino schools, including Harriet Tubman and Jefferson, and the creation of the Center for Black Excellence and Black Student Excellence. To not include displaced families in this new wealth of resources would be appalling. Gentrification is continuing to push out Black families, with housing costs increasing at exponential levels in the historically Black albino schools, which are uniquely designed to support Black students, are losing more students every year. The Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary PTA would like to see the albino right to return open enrollment policy to include the following: open enrollment to Boise Eliot Humboldt Elementary, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary, Harriet Tubman Middle School, and Jefferson High School, both from within the PPS district and from the neighboring districts. Ensuring that Boise Eliot Humboldt Elementary, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary, Harriet Tubman Middle School, and Jefferson High School all have equitable designated neighborhood boundaries to help maintain their enrollment numbers. The albino right to return transfer policy should be incorporated into the Center for Black Student Excellence. And we'd like to see a commitment to maintain this policy for a minimum of 10 years. And we'd like to see the creation of a comprehensive plan to reach displaced Black families to advertise this policy, including utilizing Black serving partners such as SEI and Albina Head Start. I feel like we've heard a lot of this discussed already in the meeting, so appreciate that. We believe that displaced Black families have the right to return to their own neighborhood, the neighborhood that they helped shape before being forced out due to gentrification. If PPS is truly committed to equity and to creating a center for Black excellence within Albina, it must also center the needs of displaced Black families. By formally reinstituting the Albina right to return transfer preference, PPS can take an important step in the right direction. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you be willing to email your statement to Kara? Because I saw Courtney taking notes, but I think it would be helpful
Yeah.
for her to have
Yeah, we'd love
all
that.
of your points there accessible. So that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll email it to all of you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I was just assuming you had Kara's email and that would be the easiest one. But
She
yes,
has-
if you have
she has
all of our,
mine too.
okay, yeah, email it to Courtney.
Yeah,
That'd
I'll
be great.
forward it if you want.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Anything else? Kara, is there any, Ms. Bradshaw, is there any other public comment?
No.
All right, we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting.